Hello, and welcome to the Critical Path Institute podcast. Our goal for this podcast is to connect the dots among our core competencies in regulatory science, biomarkers, data management and standards, clinical outcome assessments, and modeling and analytics, and how we accelerate drug development. CPath created this podcast for researchers, clinicians, and industry and regulatory professionals with the hope that these conversations and the resources we share will advance your efforts and partnerships to improve global health.
Hello, welcome everyone to a new exciting episode of the CPath podcast, where we connect the dots between science, clinical medicine, drug development, and acceleration of therapies for people in need. Today I have a great guest. She's one of our up-and-coming leaders, Maaike Everts. She leads one of our very unique programs that is essentially an accelerator. But I'll let Maaike introduce herself and talk about the name of the initiative, and then we'll dissect what that means for everyone. Go ahead, Maaike.
Great. Thank you, Klaus. It's fun to be here on the podcast. So my name is Maaike Everts. I am the Executive Director for the Translational Therapeutics Accelerator. Sometimes we call it for short TREXA, but we'll try to call it by Translational Therapeutics Accelerator or Accelerator during this discussion. And I'm looking forward to discussing with you what we do within the CPath context.
Excellent. Thanks, Maaike. And so the title, as you said, the Accelerator, which is the program you lead, takes into account three terms that I think deserve some attention: therapeutics, translation, and acceleration. Okay, so for this accelerator, let's pause and connect the dots as we do in the podcast with the other episodes that we've had so far. In other episodes, we've talked about our collaborations and our core competencies, and one common denominator in that context is the fact that for those collaborations, the main stakeholders are, of course, pharmaceutical companies, regulatory agencies, and the patient groups. And so let's start with that. The fact that everything we do is patient-focused and making sure that we accelerate the journey of those much-needed medical products to get to the people in need. Mm-hmm. But the accelerator you lead cares about the end result for patients, but the stakeholders are kind of unique against what people have heard in other episodes. So let's start with that. How is the collaboration set up, and who are the main stakeholders for the accelerator?
Great, thank you. All these stakeholders you mentioned are important for the accelerator as well, but in addition, there is a big group of academic scientists that we are trying to serve. So many discoveries originate in university settings, maybe nonprofit research institutions, and those discoveries are then built upon further by biotech companies, by pharmaceutical industry, and so on. But there is a piece missing often when it comes to translating the discoveries in the academic setting to something that is usable and de-risked enough for a for-profit entity like a pharmaceutical company to take on and further develop and ultimately get it into patients. So this is where we come in with our accelerator. We provide funding, and our academic investigators very much appreciate that. But the juicy part is that in addition to that, we provide a lot of education, guidance, mentorship to translate almost on a word level, language level, what it is, what these other stakeholders are looking for when they want to take a molecule and ultimately develop into something that can be used for patient care. There are sometimes some gaps in that translation, both on a language level and in a what kind of experiments do you need to do kind of level. And we, in our accelerator within CPath, try to help those academic investigators understand that language. We help them design the experiments that need to be done and have that mindset that's ultimately going to make a molecule attractive enough to make its journey beyond the academic walls and get into patient care.
Excellent, Maaike. Thank you for that very clear description But let's dive a little bit deeper into what you said, because this is a critical, important differentiator for the accelerator you lead. Typically, when you think of academia, they have a mission to, of course, educate the next generation of the workforce, but they also have a scholarly mission to generate new knowledge and discoveries and things of that nature. Typically, when you think of those things, you think about peer-reviewed publications and the advancement of science and knowledge that way. But what the accelerator does in a really unique way is help not just the discovery and science for science sake, knowledge for knowledge sake, but translate, as you said, the knowledge that is generated in a university into tangible potential products. And that translation is a key aspect of this. And especially because as those academic groups or nonprofit organizations start early in the discovery process, one thing is to discover a potential new drug. Another thing is to actually get that new drug to people. And one of the first steps is that translation of what sometimes gets termed the valley of death. And so can you help us dive deeper into what the valley of death is and why those stakeholders need the accelerator to help traverse that valley and how the accelerator makes a difference that way?
Great. There's a richness there that we can talk about for hours probably, but I try to keep it somewhat focused. So academics really excel at discovery. Everybody's really smart, making a lot of contributions to the body of our understanding of the world. And that forms the foundation on which a lot of drug discovery and development is built. But drug discovery and development is a team sport. And most academics traditionally live in their own laboratory, really living and breathing their biology, their disease. They know everybody in their field, but it's really focused on typically understanding how nature works and how biology works. And that is generating those publications, training the next generation of scientists, students, etc. Very important pursuits. But then when it comes to this interdisciplinary team sport science, this is where things start to break down in a typical academic setting. And this is where we come in. So you need not only to understand the biology, but you need to understand if you're developing, for example, small molecule that you can take with a tablet by mouth, you need chemistry understanding. You need to understand how to formulate it, as in what is, ultimately this become a tablet or an injection. What are the components that go into that? You need to understand what the body does to the drug. This is called pharmacokinetics. You need to understand what the drug does to the body. This is called pharmacodynamics. All of those disciplines have their own experts, and you really, really need to build a team of people that understand all those different components, come together, begin with the end in mind, which is we need to find a new therapy for patients that are suffering. Working backwards, what are all the things that we need to do? Then layer in an understanding of the regulatory pathways that are going to be critical to ultimately get this to patients. This is where the connection with CPATH is so important, because we can bring that to the table. And then there's even a commercial aspect to this as well. Not that we only fund projects that are going to be blockbusters, otherwise we're not interested. No, this is about drug discovery and development is very expensive. There's a lot of initiatives to try to make that cheaper, and we support that. But the reality in which we live is that we need to find other people interested in supporting these projects to make that journey through all the different stages to ultimately, on the other hand, come out with a drug. So you need to understand the business rationale why a pharmaceutical company might want to invest in a certain compound to pay for the expensive clinical trials, et cetera, et cetera. So again, all those different disciplines need to be coming together in an orchestrated, coordinated manner. And this is not the normal thing that happens in a university, because everybody's so focused on their own piece. And this is really what makes it fun, because we bring those experts to the table. We build project teams around the projects that we fund, and people in general really like to learn from each other. And academics and professors, they have this lifelong thirst of knowledge, right? So they typically really appreciate it to understand now something that is beyond their initial skill set. And they express a lot of enthusiasm and gratitude for what we bring to the table and who we bring to the table. And ultimately, we all need to come together to make it a success.
Thank you, Maaike. You touched on some really important aspects there, and how I'm going to connect the dots with prior episodes. So we had an episode with Diane Stevenson and Joe Hedrick connecting the dots between the pancreas and the brain. We had an episode with Colleen Hovinge talking about rare diseases. We had an episode with Ron Bartek talking about the journey specifically for Friedreich's ataxia. We had an episode with our staff that actually live with some of these conditions. One of the things that you mentioned is really important because there's the language of science, but the fact of it remains that that language takes certain dialects. There's the dialect that gets spoken in academia, the dialect that gets spoken in a regulatory agency, the dialect that gets spoken in a pharmaceutical company. And so I think a big part of your role is in the role of CPAT, but certainly the role of the Accelerator's leadership that you represent, is to serve as that translator of dialects. And so you illustrated that really well. But let's talk about one tool to help translate the dialects. And that is something that you hear me talk about repeatedly, this term called the target product profile. And so can you help us understand what that is, why that is important, and how that plays a role in the process for the Accelerator?
Great. Yeah, happy to expand on that. So the target product profile is a document. It's a living document, but it kind of ties in with this begin with the end in mind. It describes what you want your drug ultimately to do and in which patient population. So again, you define your patient population. Is this only for adults or only for kids, certain stages of diseases, which then ties into with how do you define those stages of diseases? And I think some other episodes have touched on that. There is, do you give this once a day with the pill you swallow? Is this something, an injection that you give every month? Is it something you directly infuse into your brainstem? There's going to be risks and rewards and benefits all associated with those different questions. So we ask actually our applicants, it's now mandatory for everybody that submits, even though they may have never seen a patient. They've maybe never talked to a patient. They may have never even talked to a clinician, but they know, oh, this disease has an issue, and I think we have an idea for that. Well, let's have you fill out this target product profile. You don't maybe need know all the answers to the questions that this target product profile asks you to think about, but it starts your brain turning. Wait a minute, who is going to benefit from that? What is their current standard of care? Maybe there is one, maybe there's not. If there is one, would our new drug be an add-on? How do those two drugs potentially interact? There's a lot of questions that come out with going through this thought exercise of filling out this target product profile that is really informative for even experiments you need to do very early on. We had an example in one of our projects in type 1 diabetes, and they are developing a product that would ultimately be used, ideally, in new onset or maybe pre-new onset people at risk for developing type 1 diabetes. Well, we said with some of the experts from the rest of CPATH, our scientific director, executive director of the Type 1 Diabetes Consortium, they said, well, currently this patient population would be on an antibody, teplizumab. How have you taken it into account? Well, the professors had not. They had never thought about this. So when we designed the animal experiment in which we were testing whether their new drug was going to work, yes or no, not only did we test their new drug on their own, we also had an arm that's tested the teplizumab, the antibody by itself, and the combination of the two. The combination of the two showed a much better effect than either one on their own. But this is an example where having a target product profile inform even very early stage discovery experiments. So let me segue actually for a second to the target biology profile. So not the target product profile, which really talks about a new medicine you're discovering or want to discover, but there's this target biology profile that is a new tool that we're using with our applicants this year, which is really a systematic way to lay out what you know about the biology of your target. And just to explain what a target is, this is the piece in your body or your protein or a molecule in your body. with which the drug that you're making is interacting. This is how it exerts its effect ultimately in the body. Well, you really need to understand what is happening in your body with that target in order to predict what kind of effects your drug may have. For example, is your target expressed everywhere in the body or maybe just in the brain? If it's just in the brain, what part of the brain? If you're discovering a drug, does it actually get in the brain to reach that target? That's the question that you need to ask if you understand what your target biology profile looks like. Is your target only expressed in when you have the disease or also when you're healthy? Is it going to result in side effects, yes or no? So again, it's a structured, systematic way of evaluating what do I know about the science. It's really a helpful tool for the academics to think through what are the experiments I need to do to answer these questions, again, to ultimately de-risk the product development or the medicine development so that somebody down the line gets interested in funding that beyond when the accelerator has funded the project.
Awesome. Maaike, that was a great connecting of dots. And thank you for explaining both the target profile and the target biology profile, which is an innovation in of itself that the accelerator is putting out. What that illustrates is not just the translation of dialects, but also the setting of a navigation chart so that you don't get lost into generating cool science that may not connect to an actual advancement of the new product through the evidence generation journey. And so this evidence generation component, you mentioned how through the example that you illustrated for type 1 diabetes, how that informed what type of experiments, aka what type of evidence needs to be generated to move forward. And so the other component of the key messages of the accelerator is this learn and confirm paradigm for the profiles themselves. So every time you generate a new piece of evidence, you revisit the target profile or the target biology profile, and you use that to navigate what evidence you need to generate next. I think that's a key contribution of the accelerator. But now let's talk about process itself. Knowing all the background context now, can you help us understand how the accelerator actually works procedurally for those groups that stand to benefit from what the accelerator has to offer?
Sure. So we have an annual request for proposals, and applicants, so academic professors, nonprofit researchers, can come to us with their ideas for drug discovery and development projects. We review that with an internal group of people initially, then we have some external reviews, and it's a combination of experienced, maybe retired pharma executives, some venture capitalists. We have somebody who really understands toxicology, somebody who understands animal models, a broad collection of individuals. They look at the projects. What is also important is for each project that we receive, we reach out to a typically patient-led organization to get their perspective on what the value is of this project. So it is a scientific review, but it's a scientific review with somebody who really lives and breathes that patient's journey, that patient's experience, to get a sense of what would be the impact of this project if it's successful. After we select the projects, we're pretty unique is that we're a very hands-on funder. So again, our applicants really love getting a check from us. But the added value from us is that we meet every month with our grantees. Initially, we usually get some pushback, usually from their grants and contracts managers, and said, that's a lot of controlling, input you want to have there. I'm like, this is non-negotiable. Because in those monthly meetings, we provide that input, that brain power, that expertise to keep the project on track. On track being, this is towards the development of a drug. This is not towards writing a very cool scientific paper. Sometimes the experiments can be the same, but not always. So we have conversations around this. And what is really telling, as somebody in our group mentioned this, she said, do you realize once we funded somebody and we have these monthly meetings, if they can't make the next date, they never cancel. They always want to reschedule because they see that value of us just thinking along with them. And they are not punitive meetings. They're really fun, scientific, engaging meetings. We love working with the people that we fund. They really like working with us. We bring, again, all those experts at the appropriate time to the table to have that mind meld of let's give this project the best chance of success that it has. Now, the projects that we fund are on a milestone basis. They're paid out on a milestone basis. So you need to show success in order to get the next milestone paid out. Of course, we are flexible because this is drug discovery and development. There's biology. Sometimes you run into surprises and you may need to tweak an approach here or there. But when there is a clear no-go decision, I would say, we also have the opportunity to say like, hey, together, guys, this is just not going to work. Let's use our resources differently and let's not continue this project. And we've done this once so far in our fairly short history, and it was actually a very amicable, understandable decision, even though the professor realized they would not get more funding from us. She learned so much during that time with us that we actually ended our relationship on a very positive note, and she's recommending us to other people in our orbit. So it's really that really high touch, super involved team member mentality that we bring to the group, that we really want to see these projects succeed. And then we pull other people from CPATH as part of these members, team members as well. So it's really fun to incorporate the CPATH expertise, that regulatory science depth and richness that we have to offer to the projects that can really benefit from it.
Awesome, Maaike. That was a fantastic overview of how practically what we talked about, the translation, the acceleration, the target profile, and target biology profile, generate that roadmap for the meaningful generation of evidence and making those important go or no-go decisions. So you could think of the accelerator being a bit of the GPS that allows people to avoid traffic jams, construction zones, road closures, etc. And so that's a big differentiator, and the fact that you bring in all the expertise from everyone. Can you comment very quickly on an overview of the types of medical products that the accelerator has supported, and the distribution of the academic groups that the accelerator has funded and supported?
Thank you, Klaus. I'll start answering the second question. We are actually a global accelerator, so we can fund projects and find projects all over the world. So really follow the science. When it comes to the types of projects, we started focusing on small molecule projects, and we've since expanded to also platforms, as we call it, so the types of medicine that we develop to protein-based therapeutics, so there could be antibodies or peptides, and more recently also gene therapy. When it comes to indications, we have three main buckets, but they're pretty broad. One is neurodegeneration. Then we have pediatrics and rare and orphan diseases. As a result, when you think about, okay, what are some specific examples? We have some type 1 diabetes projects, as I indicated earlier. We have some projects in oncology, even though I didn't mention cancer as an area. If it's a rare cancer or a pediatric cancer, it would be in scope for us. So we actually have funded an oncology project for glioblastoma for kids, for pediatric glioblastoma. We have a hereditary spastic paraplegia as a very rare disease, neuromuscular disorder. So it's really spans the gamut. And what is really interesting, actually, in addition to those, we recently formed a partnership with the Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation, good friend of CPATH, as part of another consortium as well. But together, we are funding projects in polycystic kidney disease. This is a nice example of when we collaborate, everybody wins. They said we have a lot of early discovery research grants. We also support clinical development of new drugs, but we're missing that in the middle piece, that translational piece that you seem to do well and have a good handle on. Can we work together and you help us with this particular stage of from early discovery to clinical development? And we had a special track this particular year for polycystic kidney disease focused projects, and we had a really nice response for that. So stay tuned in a few months. We'll hear who we pick for our next round. But our portfolio currently active is about 10, 11 projects, And every year we add 3 or 4, maybe 5, and we graduate a couple as well. And maybe to brag on us a little bit, in the last 4 years that we've existed now, we've started one company. I say we supported a project that became a startup company. And then we also have 2 projects that resulted in a licensing agreement with existing biotech and pharmaceutical companies. So thus far, we have a nice example of, I think, of how when we support a project and help tell that story and fill in the gaps when you look at, okay, what data do we need to make it attractive for somebody else to invest more money into it, that's resulting in positive outcomes.
Excellent. Very exciting future for the Accelerator, but let's spend a minute acknowledging the visionary foundation that made this all possible. Can you comment on the start of the Accelerator and the foundation that started supporting this?
Yes, we're very thankful that the Frederick Gardner Cottrell Foundation funded CPATH to start the Translational Therapeutics Accelerator. So the Cottrell Foundation is a nonprofit arm of our venture capital group in Tucson, Arizona, and they have supported educational and research since the late 90s, so they existed for a while. And I think they saw CPATH with our neutral conveners status as a really nice vehicle to support these academics to help transform their ideas for drug discovery in something tangible and really assets that somebody else might want to invest in. And because we have so many connections with different institutions all over the world, circling back to the stakeholders that you mentioned earlier, everybody needs to come together in this ecosystem to really advance these projects towards the clinic. So with our connections with pharmaceutical companies, with the regulators, with all the science and expertise that we have in-house, we have a nice basis to help those academics elevate their projects and ultimately make, hopefully, things clinical reality.
Excellent. Now, since we talked about how the Accelerator helps draw a chart for how to generate the necessary evidence to transform a discovery into a product, CPATH has our annual Global Impact Conference coming up this September, and you're going to be part of the stage with some cool sessions on precisely this topic. Can you comment on how that's going to look like this September in Washington?
Yeah, happy to give a little preview. So we're one of the first panels in the program, and we're going to talk about target selection as the foundation for ultimately evidence generation to get products helpful to patients. I'm probably butchering the title a little bit, but that's the gist of it. What's really what we wanted to do with this panel is pull from a lot of different experts in different stages of the development life cycle of drugs to give their opinion why picking that target, and again, the target is the molecule in your body in which the medicine is supposed to act on, why that's so important, why that's foundational. So we have an academic who's going to join us on the panel who's really understands target biology, and she was actually the one that helped us define his target biology profile to further dive into why is that so foundational to pick the right target to hopefully get a success. Then we have somebody from a pharmaceutical company who can really speak to, in a commercial setting, how do you think about target selection? Because they need to think about commercial success. They have a duty to patients, yes, but also to shareholders. So there needs to be a commercial opportunity as well that's tied to why is this target so important. We have somebody from the FDA come join us to really speak to the different stages of evidence generation, as we talked about a little bit earlier. The target, yes, it informs maybe potential effects and side effects, but also they may inform, can you select a biomarker to show that your target has been engaged, yes or no? Do those biomarkers play a role in patient selection, in stratification, in determining outcomes? There's a lot of places where biology plays a role that is beyond that initial, is it going to work in a body, yes or no? And then we have somebody from the PKD Foundation, actually our partner that I just talked about for the Translational Therapeutics Accelerator, to speak to why they saw partnering with CPATH and Trexa, our accelerator, as so important to really help bridge that valley of death from that early discovery to something that can be used in the clinic. So looking forward to having a panel discussion in DC in the middle of September.
Excellent, Maaike. This was a fantastic episode. Thanks for taking the time. We could go on for a few more hours talking about target profiles and translational science. But this was a great overview for our audience. And if anyone is interested in our Global Impact Conference, go on our website. The links are there for registration, so you can get to see Maaike in action on stage. Thank you so much, Maaike. This was a great conversation, as I said, and for everyone, looking forward to seeing you and hearing you in our next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy this episode? Share it with a friend or colleague, or leave a review on iTunes, and help others discover and support our mission. We are welcoming guests with a range of experiences and viewpoints. The views expressed belong to the guests themselves. Learn more about Critical Path Institute at cpath.org. That's c-path.org. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon, and thanks for listening.